This adventure challenge starts on the crowded streets of Calcutta and launches us on a whirlwind tour through much of Asia and Europe. We're in the company of two young men, one Indian, one British.
I'm Chris Proctor, and my adventure challenge is to travel overland from Calcutta to London on a motorbike. Not just any old motorbike, but a classic Royal Enfield designed by the British and currently manufactured in India.
With Chris is his friend Mark Lewis, who hasn't travelled outside India since he was a child. Having spent so many years immersed in the chaos of one of the world's most densely populated cities, he knows he's going to find the wide open spaces hard to cope with. But Mark is smitten with the motorbikes. To him, they're a classic piece of engineering. But can the bike survive such an ambitious journey? And if not, is there anyone out there who knows how to fix such an old design? But huge distances on bikes of unknown reliability won't be the only hurdle. Chris and Mark will have to ride through bandit country. They'll face bureaucratic nightmares, and as the psychological pressure cranks up, the bikes won't be the only things overheating.
I am not risking my life.
How are you risking your life? How are you risking your life?
I am not going to risk it. Finish. That's history.
Because this truck stop is a big parking stop there.
Chris Proctor soon realises this adventure will be about more than just finding the right road. If he's to succeed, he'll pretty soon have to start searching for a miracle. Preparations for the enormous journey of some 12,000 miles or 19,310 kilometres are taking place at the start of the monsoon season. Chris and Mark have to spend most of their spare time at a mechanic's workshop, learning all they can about the classic bike. The next Royal Enfield dealer on their route will be in Poland, some 17,500 kilometres away. Chris Proctor works for Future Hope, a Calcutta-based charity aiming to take children off the streets permanently.
Well, James, this is a message from Auntie.
He's their sports development officer. He's got his hands full channeling all their energy.
The latest dance moves coming out from Cal.
Chris knows more about rugby than motorbikes and coaches a club side consisting of young men who've grown up with Future Hope. He doesn't have a motorcycling background, but once in India fell in love with the Royal Enfield Bullet. He soon bought himself a 500cc model.
Anything's possible in India.
Unfortunately, a rugby accident left Chris with a dislocated ankle, and he had to return to England for an urgent operation. It was while he was away that he dreamt up, planned and raised money for his dream expedition. He even managed to raise sponsorship to take someone else with him.
So you're worried about your bike, man?
Chris needed someone with some mechanical knowledge to accompany him, and his close friend and motorcycle enthusiast Mark Lewis was the obvious choice. Mark also works at Future Hope. He's the property manager. He's passionate about motorbikes and especially the Indian-built Royal Enfield.
My passion for Royal Enfields has been there from the age of 15 when I first owned a Royal Enfield.
Having to juggle the preparation of the expedition with the demands of their full-time jobs isn't easy. But Chris and Mark managed to complete a crash course in the mechanics of this classic British bike, all in Hindi.
It's an old classic design which is now produced in India, and they haven't changed at all. The look of the bike remains the same. And that, to me, was the real appeal, was to buy a new bike which you can rely on, but it's a classic bike, so it's beautiful. Oh, we've got some.
Having bought Mark a brand new bike for the expedition, they're soon out and about on the streets of Calcutta.
Good riding, guys, good riding.
They're in a race against time to learn all they can about the bikes and gather about 100 spare parts for each of the two bikes from different corners of the city. It's a risky expedition in itself. Their mechanic can now add the final touches to the bikes.
Tyres, inner tubes, long day, yeah, you tired? Yeah. Is that all the spare parts?
What do you rent?
It's been a long day today.
Yeah.
We started about 7 o'clock. It's now quite late. I don't know what time it is. It's about 7 o'clock now. So it's 12 hours, and all part of the adventure there. That's what we're doing it for.
Chris and Mark become increasingly concerned about the encroaching monsoon. The torrential rain will make riding extremely hazardous. Over the next few weeks, Chris has to sort out all the visas and carnets to allow them to travel with their bikes through the 8 countries on their route. This leaves Chris with no option but to travel by train from Kolkata to Delhi several times. But eventually it's sorted and he's ready to go.
Wish me luck.
As dawn breaks over Calcutta, they set off. It's taken a year and a half of preparation, but finally the dream is becoming a reality. Just so long as it doesn't turn into a nightmare, and with the heavy-looking rain clouds overhead, that could easily happen. Originally, the plan had been to drive through northern India into China and Tibet, and then all the way overland to London. However, as they start their journey, the SARS virus is still restricting movement through China. So there's a new plan. Chris and Mark will ride nearly 1,500 kilometers from Calcutta to Delhi. From there, they'll take a flight to Kazakhstan, skipping the Chinese leg. Riding through the Ural Mountains, they'll pass through Russia, then Belarus, Poland, Germany and Holland, before crossing over to Britain, finishing at Buckingham Palace in London. At least that's the plan. They only have 4 days to reach Delhi if they're to catch their flight to Kazakhstan. So they have to get a move on. Today, they're hoping to cover some 700 kilometers, nearly 450 miles, right across the Indian state of Bihar and on to the holy city of Varanasi on the banks of the Ganges River.
I've driven around in Calcutta, driven around in India, but never done an overland trip like this. This is in a huge way, so I was really looking forward to it, not knowing what was ahead of me and what would be the difficulties we would face. But the one thing that I had on my mind was get on with it and go with the flow.
Chris Proctor and his friend Mark Lewis are attempting to travel overland from Calcutta to London by motorbike. They're crossing the Indian state of Bihar, making their way towards Varanasi before hopefully arriving in Delhi.
We haven't been making that good progress so far. I think we've done about 150 k's in 2.5 hours. It's getting pretty hot, but at least it's not raining and should be at this time of year, the monsoon. It's been raining heaps before we left Enfield.
Next stop is Varanasi, 600 km from here.
We're in beautiful Bihar. It's the poorest state in India, next to West Bengal, and well known for its bandit country. It's a real bandit country.
Bihar is recognised as one of the most lawless states in India. There have been several hijackings, especially at night. So Chris and Mark are desperate to cover the distance in one day and be off the road after dark.
My main concern, and I always told Chris, that the moment we enter Bihar, we must get out of it also on the same day.
But the monsoon rains are making a mockery of Mark's plan. The roads are getting more slippery by the minute. They'll now have to drive more slowly, and they're not even halfway to Varanasi.
We're doing well, Jack. Do you reckon we make it?
Push ourselves a bit.
They're hungry and want to rest, but at the back of their minds is the thought of being stuck in bandit country overnight. Mark wants to press on in the rain and into the night if necessary. But Chris is unsure.
Try and make it to Varanasi tonight. It's going to be at least 10 o'clock. Which is Mark's idea. I don't want to drive in the rain, but I've got no choice, and I don't want to have to drive at night, which is even worse. But we're on a tight schedule, so we just have to do it.
Chris and Mark must carry on riding for about 4 more hours if they're to get out of Bihar. A lapse in concentration could be fatal. The rain has made riding conditions extremely dangerous. The traffic has come to a standstill because of an accident. A lorry has overturned on the side of the road. No one can move for over an hour. It soon gets dark, but they have to keep going once the road is clear. Mark has more experience in these conditions than Chris and races ahead. After over 10 hours on the road, Chris is tired but tries to keep up. He opens up the throttle on his 500cc bike for the final push out of Bihar. Chris's back tyre has blown and he's crashed on the side of the road.
Fell off the bike. Lucky it wasn't more serious. All the front is gone. Cut my hands up. Flat tyre. Pretty shaken up the whole thing.
Mark speaks to some local people who try and help fix the bike. They work into the night, but to no avail. They need a mechanic.
Mark's just gone off to the mechanics now, about 20 kilometres away, and hopefully he's going to come back with someone who might be able to sort the back tyre, because it's not just a flat tyre, it's bent axle as well, and the sprocket's gone. And it could be quite complicated. On top of that, the front light is totally ruined.
That afternoon, Mark returns with a mechanic who tries to repair the damage. A police patrol arrives to see what's going on. And the inevitable crowd of curious onlookers soon gathers around. The mechanic works on the bike for over 5 hours, ingeniously improvising with makeshift parts. It's worked. They're on the road again. They're way behind schedule and drive on into the night. They can't afford to miss their flight from Delhi. They finally arrive at their next stop, Varanasi, just before midnight. Varanasi, on the banks of the river Ganges, is one of the holiest cities in India. Pilgrims come every year to bathe in the waters, something the local people do every day. Chris takes a quiet moment early the next morning to reflect on his disastrous start to the expedition.
It's beautiful down here, though. It really is quiet and therapeutic. Just what the doctor ordered. Anyway, better hit the road.
Chris and Mark now face a journey of about 577 kilometers to Agra, which they managed to complete in a single day. There's no time to go sightseeing at the Taj Mahal. They're straight back on the road first thing in the morning for the final 200 kilometers to Delhi. As they reach the fringes of Delhi after 4 days on the road, it's beginning to look as if Chris and Mark might catch their flight after all. But then they ride into trouble. An enormous dust storm in scorching heat of 50 degrees forces them to stop.
What a way to come into the city, what a welcome. Final destination and we're getting annihilated by little pieces of dust.
They must press on to catch their flight.
Not going to make it if this carries on.
With their Kazakhstani visas already starting to expire, they race into the hustle and bustle of Delhi and get their bikes packed up, ready to fly the next day. But they've raced into an administrative nightmare. There are arguments about costs, and the airline is insisting that unless the bikes are crated up to a specific set of dimensions, they won't be allowed on the plane. The way the bikes are crated at the moment, they won't even fit through the plane's cargo doors. So for now, they're not going anywhere. There's a desperate attempt to resize the crates for the flight leaving the following morning.
There's still a small chance that we're going to get on our flight with our bikes tomorrow, but to be quite honest with you, I think that's disappeared now. We're going to only hope and pray, so fingers crossed.
But the wrangling continues overnight, with the packers apparently unable to meet the requirements of the airline. It's the day of the flight, and Chris is getting desperate.
We've got 2 people waiting for us in Kazakhstan. Our flight's today. We've got about 50,000 rupees put down on the flight, plus £2,500 put down on the cargo. So basically, if it doesn't go through, we're absolutely screwed. And I'm mad. I'm really mad, and I'm panicking. I don't know what to do.
But there's nothing he can do. They end up missing their flight, and Chris and Mark spend the next 5 days stuck in Delhi, trying to resolve the problem as the time remaining on their Kazakhstani visas slowly ticks away.
We've spoken to these people face to face, and they've guaranteed that they can take the cargo. And 5-6 hours before we're meant to fly and load the plane up, they're telling us under no circumstances that they'll take the cargo. What the hell do we do? I'm searching for a miracle right now. We all are.
They've optimistically gone ahead and booked another flight. But on the day before it's due to leave, the problem still hasn't been fully resolved, so the rest of the expedition is now in serious jeopardy. Just as they're almost resigned to failure, the word comes that it's all been sorted out, and that Chris and Mark will be flying to Kazakhstan first thing in the morning.
Done well today. All the work has been completed. The cargo has been put into the shed. We're handing over the papers to the Air Kazakhstan Airlines office so that they have all the papers and there's no more upsets. We hope.
They want to get to the airport in plenty of time, but as he thinks about the journey, Mark is getting nervous. Apart from a couple of trips with his parents when he was a small child, he's never been out of India before.
Hope everything works out well.
But one thing's for sure is we're heading straight to the airport now, and if all goes well, we'll be on that plane. And in Almaty in Kazakhstan within a few hours' time.
Fate looks as though it's trying to prevent him ever leaving the country again, when a couple of hours later they get stuck in a Delhi gridlock. It's early evening, and the traffic has ground to a standstill due to the arrival of a VIP. The jams carry on well after dark, and they barely reach the airport on time. When finally they do arrive, they're told the crated bikes still won't fit through the cargo door. They'll have to be transported unpacked and risk getting damaged. But the real bombshell is that Mark isn't being allowed to travel at all.
Mark is not allowed to fly at the moment because he's got something which says that he's got to check that he's not an illegal immigrant. We've got to go and see customs and write a letter to them. I just hope and pray that it's going to be okay. We get all this way and we're about to get on the plane and the customs officer looks at him, and despite having 5-6 visas in his passport, he's not allowed to go on. We now have under half an hour to get on a plane, and we're also having to write a letter to say that I accept all responsibility for the damage caused to our cargo, the motorbikes.
A last-minute plea to the Chief of Customs is successful, and Mark is allowed to travel. They board the flight with 2 minutes to go.
We were damn lucky to get onto that flight because I needed special permission from the airport authorities, have my passport stamped at that given point of time, about 20 minutes before the flight, and then run all the way with my luggage, then have it checked. I mean, that was the worst day of my life.
Tough thing, but finally on the plane. Hope we don't get stuck any place anymore.
They head northwards to Almaty in southern Kazakhstan, a 3-hour flight. But getting the bikes out of customs in Kazakhstan proves just as difficult as getting them on the plane in Delhi. They're behind these locked gates, and Mark paces around impatiently. Five days later, after much wrangling, the 2 bikes are released.
The fuel tank's damaged. Dented on the right hand side as well. Then you've got a crack here. This is dented.
The bikes have taken some knocks in transit. After some minor mechanical work, the big question now is if they'll start. Mark's bike just won't start and everyone's getting nervous.
Can we take over?
He tries again, but to no avail. It's time for a closer look and some more running repairs. The nearest Royal Enfield dealer is in Poland, so it's all down to Mark at the moment.
We've got to go fast, all right?
Chris and Mark have been joined by 2 friends who'll be filming them the rest of the way. Their friends lend a hand to push start the bikes. It's worked, and Chris shows his relief.
Oh, yeah! Woo!
They hit the road again with their new film crew, Barney and Molly, each perched on the back of a bike. Ahead of them lies a journey through one of the largest countries on Earth. Today they aim to travel through the arid desert to Balkhash. From there they'll ride on to the capital Astana. By the time they cross over into Russia, they'll have covered some 2,000 kilometers. The long road northwards is desolate and a complete contrast to the hustle and bustle of India.
It's something that we'd never experienced before, so for everyone involved in the trip it was a total foreign environment, and especially for Mark. He was so used to the hustle and bustle and the sort of density of people in India and the sort of variety of things you see on the road, to suddenly find a straight road which didn't have a turn in it for hundreds and hundreds of miles and kilometers was just really difficult to get his head around.
The roads are ragged, the terrain tough, and the bikes are taking a battering. It's a straight route and they get to Balkhash on schedule. But the bikes have suffered greatly during the long, rough journey.
Courtesy of Kazakh roads, we've got, you see this thing here, this is the silencer, which is like the exhaust on the bike. Now, at the moment it's only being held together by one fixing, but it's supposed to be held together again by a fixing here. So what we did is temporarily put some wire on it to hold it. But that's basically making lots of noise, and I don't like the noise, and we need to get this part here welded, which again is only going to be temporary because it's quite a heavy piece. You can see it's shaking around a lot. Now if that fell off, then we'd really be in the shit, because the bike basically wouldn't run. So it's just all to do with the roads, and hopefully that's all going to get better when we get to Russia. But right now we've got a day in hand, so we can get everything sorted. Touch wood.
The next day they head off to Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, with bits of wire keeping various parts of the bikes intact. But again, it's a straight line. In just 2 days of solid riding, they managed to cover nearly 2,000 kilometers. They get there on schedule, but need a place to eat and sleep. Practically no English is spoken here, so most of the communication at the moment is in sign language. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. They meet a local businessman called Vova, who takes a liking to the adventurers and wants to guide them to the Russian border. Vova is actually Russian himself, although he lives in Kazakhstan, and all evidence points to him being Astana's Mr. Fix-It. In no time at all, he sorts out their accommodation and promises to take them to a friendly mechanic the next day to do some much-needed welding. Chris and Mark have completely different reactions to the adventures of the day. Chris is buoyant and optimistic at what he considers a stroke of luck, but for Mark, it's all too much.
This bike is not going far, okay? I've driven it today. I know what's it like. This bike will conk off somewhere in the middle, and that'll be it. I cannot do anything to it.
He's not used to travelling and is very worried about his bike. He doesn't want people tinkering with it if they're not qualified to work on his classic machine.
It's not pulling. That is the serious problem. It's nothing got to do with the carburetor. It's got nothing to do with the air filter. But there is a serious problem in this bike.
But mate, listen.
I mean, I understand it's a totally different ball game when a foreigner comes out, you know, because y'all are the type to go roaming. We have never roamed. We've always stayed in India. You know, I mean, for you to go to Australia and stay 6-8 weeks, or then for that matter come to India and stay for 3 years, that's what you've been doing. It's for you, it's normal. For me, it's not normal. It's very hard.
Chris Proctor and his friend Mark Lewis are attempting to travel from Kolkata to London on classic motorbikes. They're in Kazakhstan, where the bikes have taken a battering on the roads. Initially, Mark was worried about any local repairs, but the welding that's needed isn't particularly specialist. And after a few final touches, he's prepared to press on. Next stop, Russia. But with their Russian visa not starting for a few days, for the first time in the expedition so far, they're not in a mad rush. They follow Vova, who insists on accompanying them all the way to the border, with regular stops along the way to experience some of the Kazakhstani culture. Mark is beginning to relax.
This is Kazakh history. Kazakh
History.
Chris and Mark are both glad to be out on the open road again, heading for the Russian border. And Mark's bike is running well. Mark has been quiet and his bike has kept going. But about 100 kilometers from the Russian border, he thinks his bike is flagging and he starts worrying all over again. He's stopped by the side of the road and Chris has come back to see what's wrong.
Well, that bike is going to be able to run at 50 miles, 50 kms down there.
What with his nervousness about being away from home and his worry about the state of his bike, Mark's now having second thoughts about the entire expedition.
I was basically concerned about the bike totally seizing, the engine seizing, and there was no other way we could ever, get head on with the trip. I wanted somebody, to help me and guide me at that point of time to tell me exactly what was wrong, which I was missing,
We've got to actually keep going forward, whatever it takes.
Vova, their local Mr. Fix-It friend, is stuck in the middle as the tension mounts, not knowing what to make of it all.
What you are only thinking of is riding this bike. You can ride it, I have no problems.
No, I'm not thinking of riding. I'm saying
I am certainly not going to ride this bike.
Fine, you ride my bike.
No, I'm not going to ride your bike too also, because it's as worse as mine. Okay? But you want to get to the border with this baby, I don't mind. We'll get to the border and then you decide what you want to do. Okay? Because I'm not riding this bike anymore. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. That's my last decision. I am not riding her anymore.
Mark's decision to quit leaves them in the middle of nowhere with visas running out fast.
Whether that you don't want to go on?
No, I don't want to ride this to a place where I know I'm sure she's not going to pull through it. Okay, that's my feeling.
Mark,
Neither have you any knowledge about the bike, Chris. Neither do I have any much knowledge, and we do not trust anybody else to repair this bike.
What I'm saying,
please, Chris.
You're forgetting how we've been treated everywhere we've been.
I am not risking my life.
How are you risking your life? How are you risking your life?
I am not going to risk it. Finish. That's history.
How are you
I am not going anymore. Please, Vani, can you put that camera off? I don't want in Moscow or in Belarus who can fix
But the row continues further on by the side of the road.
But I am not certainly riding that bike to risk my life on that bike. That's straight.
I understand that, mate.
Okay?
I understand you don't want to risk your life.
What I want to do is get that bike on a lorry, get it to Astana, and then from there we can ship it wherever we want, either to England, okay, or either back to Kolkata.
Listen. It's my decision what to do with the actual bikes.
Yeah.
If it's to do with your safety and the fact that the wheels fall off, then that's fine.
It looks as though Mark's had enough.
Because I'm not riding this bike anymore. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. That's my last decision. I am not riding her anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
In desperation, Chris takes Mark's bike to try and prove to him that it's working. As Chris drives off into the distance, Mark continues his row with anyone who'll listen.
Is Poland, and I would, because if there was somebody, Molly, in Russia who...
Mark's bike is still going strong, but there again, so is he.
Service Enfields, then it would pop up on the website, and I wouldn't have had a problem because I knew somebody could have helped us.
That bike, I just ran it perfectly down there. Because I need your help. I can't do it on my own without you. That's what, right from the start.
Although the bike is running reasonably well, Mark still won't budge.
You just said you'll get to Russia and then you get on
I
the
need you to drive it to, Mark.
No, you can't drive this
Why
vehicle?
give up? I really can't understand it, mate. And you might say, I don't expect you to, but all I'm asking you, and you gave me your word that you would give it as far as you could give it. You pushed the bike as far as it will go.
After 2 hours of rowing, Chris has had enough. Vova has taken one of the film crew in his car, and Chris follows them towards the border. Mark is left alone with the remaining cameraman. Chris has just proved that his bike is still running at the moment, and he decides to press on. Chris isn't stopping now and tears off towards Russia. Mark doesn't really have any choice but to follow. It would be more of a nightmare for him to head backwards than go forwards. With Vova's help at the border, they're all able to pass into Russia with a minimum of fuss and carry on riding until they reach a small town called Kurgan. After a night's rest, they press on to the Ural Mountains, but then disaster strikes.
As we reach the Ural Mountains, Mark's bike conked out. We're basically stranded our second day into Russia in the Ural Mountains. It was quite a worrying time.
Mark's fears about his bike have turned out to be valid after all.
The most important thing is just not to panic about it, you know?
I'm not panicking.
And we'll just see what we can do. Whatever we can do, we'll do. How do you get the rods in again? I forgot.
You just take off the tank, you take off these two.
And then
you
just
take off the
slots
rod.
They're going to need a talented mechanic.
Don't you have to line it with the piston? No, you don't.
That's the thing.
Remarkably, Mark is keeping his cool.
You got to bring the piston to the topmost point.
Yeah.
And then adjust it.
But at the end of the day, we know we've got time in hand to play with. That's the most important thing. We're not going to be risking, you know, our visas or anything like that.
The expedition is now at a complete standstill. All they can do is hope that a passing truck will stop and carry the bikes towards Moscow. A police car notices them and returns a few minutes later.
Bike? Broken. No go. This bike, it's okay. This bike, no go.
But there's a massive communication problem.
We go to Moscow.
Yeah.
Moscow. Bikes, Moscow.
So it's back to sign language.
Bike, truck. Is there truck? Put bike on top. Bike on left.
They get the message across, and the police are helpful.
We need a mechanic. I'll follow you on.
One of them stops a truck to help Chris and Mark on their way to Moscow.
When you ran it, what gear were you in?
Second.
And it went up the hill. 1, 2, 3. Left, up.
The motorbike is heavy, and it takes all their combined strength to get them on the truck. The truck driver is only going a small part of the way, and another problem is looming down the road. Mark isn't pleased.
Want to catch the next flight home?
But home for tonight is a cabin, an old railway carriage at the roadside motel.
It's not a very complicating bike. It's a very simple bike. All you need to do is sit down and spend a little time with it, which I eventually did. But my love for bikes have always been from a young age. So, you know, the minor jobs on a bike were understandable. I could do that. But the major thing, like the gearbox and dismantling the entire engine, I need a bit of practice on that.
Mark works on his bike into the evening, but to no avail. They're both tired, but the hard work is about to begin. They're looking for a truck going to Moscow, where they hope to find a mechanic.
Nothing gonna fit in there, boy. Actually standing out there in the cold in your pants and boots and a vest, going up to random truck drivers, one, they often got the wrong impression as to what we wanted, and secondly, they all had their trucks were totally full up. So we stayed up, I think, till about 8 that morning.
For the first time, they're completely out of luck. Mark's smiling, but they're over 2,000 kilometers from Moscow, and they're stranded. And then a stroke of luck. It might not look like it, but this Turkish truck driver is offering them a lift. The driver is willing to take them over towards Moscow.
I think that's a good idea. If we get to summer, at least we're making progress. We're going towards Moscow, which is our original
It
route.
won't sort out all their problems with Mark's bike, but after a quick conference, they decide to accept the offer, and soon the motorbikes are being hauled onto the lorry.
Welcome!
Chris, Mark and their crew soon make friends with 2 Ukrainian hitchhikers also on board. The driver is in high spirits and enjoying their company. They make good progress with their eccentric driver until they reach a police checkpoint.
We stay in car? Do we stay in?
They keep their heads down in the large lorry while the driver shows his documents to the police. He's taking a risk as he's not sure he's allowed to carry undeclared cargo. All's well, and they manage to avoid being spotted at a further 30 police checkpoints. After being crammed in the lorry all day, they arrive at a petrol station near a town called Samara. By chance, they bump into one of the biker crew of Samara. Mark's not sure how friendly he's going to be. The Russian biker wants to help and is calling his mates, one of whom is a mechanic. No one really knows what he'll make of the classic model. But Chris has already agreed to meet the bikers and their mechanic further on up the road.
Mark's really, he doesn't seem too happy about it. I think he's a bit pissed off that we found someone who might solve the bike's problem. And my heart of hearts thinks that he just wants to leave the bikes, and he's got to sort his act out, really, haven't we?
These guys were great guys, you know, they had fantastic looking bikes. But with the Royal Enfield, you only give it to a person who knows about the Royal Enfield. You mustn't give it to anybody who doesn't. It's a sophisticated bike. If you mess with her in the wrong way, she's going to mess back with you in the wrong way. So you won't want that to happen when you're doing such a long trip.
Chris and Mark soon meet the rest of the Samara biker crew. At first sight, Russia's answer to the Hells Angels.
Can you ask him whether he's seen a Royal Enfield before?
He has. I asked him, he said he has.
No. By him saying yes doesn't make me feel totally sure.
What's he thinking?
I totally understand what he's trying to say, that these guys are here to help us. Okay. But
I realize you.
my main worry
But
is...
I think they can help you.
Mark won't let anyone near his bike, and Chris can only hope he'll change his mind after a good night's sleep.
Come on, mate. Don't go. I'm
Chris Proctor and his friend Mark Lewis are riding classic motorbikes from Calcutta to London. An epic journey of some 19,000 kilometers across 2 continents. In Russia, they need to get some repairs done, and a group of bikers has helped them find a mechanic. Mark has concerns, but he allows the mechanic to work on his bike over the next couple of days. There's also time for him to check Chris's bike. The mechanic gets Mark's engine running again, so there's no reason why they can't get back onto the road. Whatever the Russian mechanic did, it seems to have worked. A couple of days later, they've managed to cover over 1,000 kilometers and are cruising through Moscow, stopping just long enough for a photo opportunity in Red Square. From Moscow, it's only a day's ride to Minsk in Belarus. Belarus is one of the shortest legs of their journey, and after covering 750 kilometers in a day, they're in Poland. Chris and Mark have been on the road with their bikes for 5 weeks now, and at last the bikes can be serviced at a Pucker Royal Enfield dealer.
Poland is where I met my first Indian friend, and he's a dealer of the Enfield company, an amazing guy, and he's crazy of those bikes.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. Yeah, brilliant.
Very nice show. Seeing you guys, I mean, it's amazing.
Well, we're pretty amazed to be here ourselves. So.
The dealer offers them his most experienced mechanic. Nevertheless, Mark insists on watching him while he works on his bike.
That guy is
No, I totally trust you when you say
go. I mean, go. It's not a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
You can go there. That's not a problem.
The engine on Mark's bike does need a lot of attention, and he goes off with the mechanic. Chris just needs a new silencer.
You're off on a holiday, I'm off on work.
Exactly. Yes. Actually, this is work not required.
This is enjoyment. I love working with bikes.
It's good
my life.
that you corrected that.
I'm gonna miss him.
After a day's work on the bikes, they're ready to press on to the next stage of the expedition. Both bikes are now in excellent condition, and later that evening Chris and Mark are invited to a special function. They're presented with certificates for the longest ever journey by this classic model to Poland.
It's like graduating from uni.
Mark has the distinction of being the only Indian to have ever made such a journey. Rejuvenated, they press on out of Poland and into Germany. They're heading for Berlin.
Going into Germany, again, we covered the place in 2 days, camping in fields and not really getting a feel of the place. We cruised through Berlin, I think, for a few hours and did a few of the sites, the Berlin Wall and the Brandenburg Gate, but never really settled anywhere.
Having met one Indian compatriot in Poland, Mark is now looking forward to seeing his best friend Ali, who's emigrated to Holland, their next destination.
Now, Holland was quite a special part of the trip for us because Ali, who had emigrated there, was finally our chance to meet him, and he had no idea that we were going to be coming. So when he finally saw us, I mean, it was probably the most emotional part of the trip for Mark and I.
Give me a You good? Yeah? Oh, you look great, eh?
But it's a very short reunion. Chris and Mark have a ferry to catch to England. There's only one problem. They've run completely out of petrol and have to push the bikes onto the ferry. They just make it on time.
1, 2, go! Work it! To England!
We're going to make it! The ferry's going, buddy! Hurry up, mate! We're 200 yards now from Buckingham Palace. Friends and family, we hope, are waiting for us. We're 10 minutes late. no worries finding a way into London. We're there.
So after 8 countries, 4 mechanics, 3 tyres, 2 exhausts and a lot of welding, Mark and Chris and their beloved motorbikes finally arrive at Buckingham Palace. The trip from Kolkata has taken 5 weeks and added some 19,000 kilometres to each bike's clock. Time for a well-earned oil change and a cup of tea to celebrate.